Imagine waking up to find a violation notice on your door for something as ridiculous as a single leaf on your driveway. Now, imagine that the person enforcing these rules isn't even a real authority, but a power-hungry HOA Karen who thinks she owns the entire neighborhood. Sounds crazy, right? Well, buckle up, because this isn't just a story about petty HOA drama. It's about how I exposed Karen, turned the entire neighborhood against her, and watched as she destroyed herself in the most ironic way possible. And trust me, you won't believe how it ends. Hello, beautiful peoples. Before we dive in, let me know, where are you watching this from? Tell us in the comments and subscribe. The neighborhood was the kind of place where everything looked picture perfect: manicured lawns, white picket fences, and just the right balance of friendly waves and polite indifference. It was peaceful, predictable, and exactly what I wanted when I moved in. My little slice of suburbia came with no drama, no nosy neighbors, and, most importantly, no HOA. At least, that's what I thought. Enter Karen. She appeared one afternoon like a storm cloud in a power suit, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning my property as if she was assessing a crime scene. Her short, aggressively styled haircut only added to the aura of authority she had clearly given herself. She marched up my driveway with the confidence of someone who believed she ran the world, or at the very least, the cul-de-sac. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need to talk about your property violations." I looked up from my perfectly good Saturday, blinking in confusion. "I'm sorry, what violations?" Karen huffed, shifting her weight onto one hip like she was bracing for battle. "Your grass is too long." I glanced at my lawn. It was fine. Green, even. Certainly not the overgrown jungle she was implying. "I think it's within normal limits." "Well," she sniffed, "we have very specific regulations in this neighborhood, and I expect all homeowners to follow them." That's when I realized she assumed I was part of the HOA. A simple mistake, maybe, except for the fact that Karen was delivering this information with the kind of smug authority that suggested she enjoyed enforcing rules far more than she enjoyed following them. "Yeah, I'm actually not in the HOA," I said, smiling as I went back to what I was doing. Silence. The kind of silence where you can practically hear someone mentally short-circuiting. Then, Karen's eyes narrowed. "Everyone in this neighborhood follows HOA standards." I shrugged. "I don't pay HOA dues. My property isn't part of it." For a brief moment, I thought that would be the end of it. That a reasonable person, upon learning that they had no authority over my property, would simply move on. But Karen was not a reasonable person. Her expression shifted into one of barely contained outrage. "That's ridiculous. You live here, so you should follow the same rules as everyone else." I could see where this was going, but I had no interest in getting dragged into an argument about rules that didn't apply to me. "Well, that's not how property ownership works," I said, trying to keep the amusement out of my voice. Karen was undeterred. She pulled out a folder, flipping through pages like she was preparing a legal argument. "Your mailbox," she snapped, jabbing a finger toward it. "It's not HOA compliant." I blinked. "Again, I'm not in the HOA. That doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want." I was starting to think that was exactly what it meant. Karen crossed her arms, standing on my property like a self-appointed warden of the neighborhood. "We'll see about that," she said ominously before marching off, clipboard clutched tightly in her grasp. I should have known that wouldn't be the last of it. I had hoped that Karen's dramatic exit meant she would come to her senses, maybe look into the fact that she had no authority over my property and move on with her life. But that hope was short-lived. The very next morning, I found a violation notice taped to my front door. It wasn't from the city or any real governing body. No, this was something Karen had clearly printed herself, complete with an official-looking HOA logo that I was pretty sure she had designed in Microsoft Word. The letter was full of bolded words and aggressive underlining, warning me that my non-compliant lawn maintenance was an unacceptable disruption to neighborhood aesthetics. I stood there for a moment, reading it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then I laughed. Karen had officially lost it. Later that day, she reappeared on the sidewalk like some kind of suburban security guard, standing with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on my house. She wasn't alone either. She had enlisted a couple of other HOA zealots. Women who, based on their matching scowls, seemed just as determined to enforce imaginary rules. I gave them a polite wave. Karen did not wave back. Instead, she marched up my driveway once again, this time with an even more exaggerated sense of authority. "Did you receive your violation notice?" she asked, in the tone of a school principal confronting a delinquent student. I did, I said, nodding. Very creative work, by the way. You should consider a career in graphic design. Karen did not appreciate my sarcasm. This is not a joke, she snapped. You are violating multiple HOA regulations, and if you do not comply, we will escalate this matter. I raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah, and who exactly are you escalating it to? She hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying. The HOA board. I grinned. Great. Can't wait to hear what they have to say about the fact that I'm not even in the HOA. The muscle in her jaw twitched. That doesn't mean you can just ignore the community's standards. I actually think it means exactly that, I replied. But you go ahead and escalate. Let me know what they say. Karen's face flushed red, but she didn't have a comeback. Instead, she turned on her heel and stomped back toward her little group of enforcers, muttering something under her breath. I figured that would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't giving up that easily. ####, the list of fake rules begins. The next few days were filled with a steady stream of nonsense. Karen had apparently decided that if she couldn't make me legally comply, she would make my life as difficult as possible. First, she started leaving notes in my mailbox. Lots of notes. Some were typed up formal warnings about things like the unapproved color of my front door, it was beige. The incorrect placement of my trash cans. The unauthorized lawn decorations, I had a single garden gnome. Then, she moved on to photographic evidence. One morning, I walked outside to find Karen standing on the sidewalk with her phone, snapping pictures of my house. What are you doing? I asked. She didn't even look up. Documenting your violations. I let out a long sigh. You know, this is starting to get a little weird. Karen scoffed. What's weird is your complete disregard for community standards. She then proceeded to take a close-up picture of my mailbox. For the next week, I noticed her patrolling the street more often, sometimes walking back and forth in front of my house multiple times a day. It was like I had my own personal stalker. Except instead of watching me for criminal activity, she was investigating whether my lawn met her standards. #### Karen doubles down. When notes and photos didn't work, Karen upped the ante. One evening, I heard knocking at my door, loud, insistent knocking. I opened it to find Karen standing there, once again clutching her clipboard of doom. Good evening, she said with forced politeness. We need to discuss your yard. I was exhausted and already over this entire situation, but I figured I'd entertain her latest complaint. What about it? She gestured dramatically. It's uneven. I blinked. What? Karen pursed her lips. The grass. There are inconsistencies in height. Some areas are slightly longer than others. I stared at her for a solid 5 seconds, trying to figure out if this was some kind of elaborate prank. You're joking. I am absolutely not, she said, flipping open her clipboard. I have measured and... You measured my grass? I interrupted, incredulous. Karen looked at me like I was the crazy one. I measure everyone's grass. That was the moment I realized this woman had way too much time on her hands. I exhaled slowly. Karen, I don't know how to explain this to you for the 15th time, but I am not in your HOA. I do not have to follow HOA rules. I am not trimming my grass to satisfy your personal aesthetic. Her eyes flashed with something that looked suspiciously like rage. You're bringing down property values, she hissed. Your neglect affects the entire neighborhood. I glanced around at the perfectly normal houses surrounding us. Yeah, I don't think anyone else cares. Karen took a sharp breath and squared her shoulders. Fine. If you won't take responsibility, then I have no choice but to report this to the authorities. I frowned. What authorities? Her lips curled into a smug smile. The city. I couldn't help it, I laughed. You're going to report me to the city, over my grass? She didn't flinch. I will do whatever is necessary to maintain the integrity of this neighborhood. At that point, I knew arguing was pointless, so I just shook my head and closed the door. 2 days later, I came home to find a city inspector standing on my lawn. ###, the city gets involved. The inspector, a bored-looking man in his 50s, greeted me with a tired wave. Hey, I got a complaint about your property. I groaned. Let me guess, Karen? He chuckled. Yeah, she calls about something at least once a month. I wasn't surprised. So, what's the issue this time? The inspector glanced at his notes. Something about your grass being too tall? I gestured at my lawn. Does this look like a violation? He gave it a quick once-over, then shrugged. Nope. Karen was standing on the sidewalk, watching with laser focus. I could practically see the steam coming out of her ears as the inspector turned to leave. But she wasn't done yet. Wait, she called out, rushing forward. Did you measure it? Because I did, and there are areas that are over 3 inches. The inspector sighed, clearly so done with her nonsense. Ma'am, there's no city ordinance about grass height unless it's overgrown to the point of being a fire hazard. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But, he's disrupting neighborhood aesthetics. The inspector gave me a knowing look before muttering, "Have a nice day," and walking away. Karen stood frozen in place, her hands clenching into fists. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would finally be enough to make her give up. I was wrong. Because the next day, Karen did the most ridiculous thing yet. She called 911. The moment I saw the police cruiser pull up in front of my house, I knew exactly who was responsible. Because who else would escalate a suburban lawn dispute to law enforcement? I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching as the officer got out of the car. He looked about as enthusiastic as someone who had just been called to break up a fight between 2 toddlers over a crayon. Before I could even say a word, Karen appeared. She marched up to the officer, her face a mix of righteous fury and smug satisfaction. Finally. She huffed. Thank you for coming, officer. I've been dealing with a situation. The cop glanced at me, then back at Karen. Ma'am, you called about a neighborhood dispute? Karen nodded sharply. Yes. It's gotten out of control. I leaned against the doorframe, waiting for this circus act to unfold. You called the police over my lawn? Karen shot me a glare. It's not just the lawn, it's the complete disregard for community rules. The non-regulation mailbox, the improper trash can placement, The officer held up a hand, looking like he deeply regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment. Ma'am, is there a crime happening here? Karen hesitated. Well, she gestured wildly at my property. It's a violation. The officer sighed, clearly so done with this nonsense. Ma'am, HOA rules are not enforceable by the police. And he just told you. He's not even in the HOA. Karen's face twitched. But, the officer turned to me. Sir, do you need anything? I grinned. Nope. Just enjoying the show. Karen let out a strangled sound as the cop walked back to his car. She stormed after him, still ranting, but he rolled up the window and drove off. That was it. That was the moment I decided Karen needed to be humbled. And I had just the plan. Hashtag retaliation, but make it subtle. If Karen wanted to be petty, then I could be petty too. But unlike her, I preferred my pettiness to be entertaining. First, I installed a bigger, brighter, more obnoxious lawn gnome in my front yard. If she was going to throw a fit about my decorations, I was going to give her something worth complaining about. Not just one gnome. 20. A whole army of tiny ceramic warriors, lined up in formation, facing her house. It took less than an hour before I heard her furious screech from across the street. The next day, I upped my game. Karen had made a point of complaining about my mailbox, so I went online and found the ugliest, most ridiculous mailbox I could buy, a bright, neon green monstrosity shaped like a giant fish. It arrived a week later, and I installed it immediately. The morning after it went up, I stepped outside with my coffee just in time to catch Karen staring at it in silent horror. I sipped my drink and smiled. Morning, Karen. She didn't even respond. She just stormed back into her house, probably to draft another round of fake violation notices. Hashtag Karen's breaking point. At this point, I could tell Karen was starting to lose her grip. The woman was spiraling. She was spending more time monitoring my property than her own. She even tried gathering neighborhood support, which completely backfired when the other residents started turning against her. One evening, I was taking out my perfectly legal trash bins when my neighbor Tom strolled over, shaking his head. I used to think Karen was just a little particular, he said, chuckling. But after the whole 911 call, yeah, she's completely unhinged. I laughed. She's still sending violation notices like she's a real authority. Tom smirked. Oh, I know. I got one last week. Apparently, my porch lights disrupt neighborhood aesthetics. That made me pause. Wait, isn't your house across the street from hers? He nodded. Yup. Not even remotely in her line of sight. That was when I realized that Karen wasn't just targeting me anymore. She was losing control. Hashtag the ultimate counterattack. I had to finish this. So I did the one thing Karen couldn't stand. I threw a block party. Not just any block party. A fully HOA rule violating, Karen infuriating celebration of suburban anarchy. I sent out invites to every single neighbor, except one, of course. We had colorful, non-HOA approved decorations. Music past acceptable noise hours. Lawn chairs not uniform in color. And the cherry on top? Every single mailbox on the street was temporarily decorated to match mine. That was it. That was Karen's breaking point. She stormed out of her house mid-party, fists clenched, ready to unleash a nuclear-level rant. But before she could even get a word out, she realized no one was listening. Her usual supporters? They were at the party. The HOA board? They had stopped taking her complaints seriously. And me? I just raised my drink and smiled. Karen, care to join us? Her face turned a deep shade of red. She stomped back inside, slamming the door. It was the sweetest victory. Hashtag Karen's last attempt at revenge. After the party, Karen tried one last desperate move. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Karen. From a lawyer. Apparently, she had hired an attorney to send me a cease and desist. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the letter. It was filled with legal jargon that boiled down to one thing asterisk. Stop harassing Karen. Harassing? Me. I had been minding my own business. But I knew better than to take the bait. Instead, I simply sent the letter to my own attorney, who assured me that it was completely baseless. I never heard about it again. And just like that, Karen's final attempt to assert dominance failed. She was done. Hashtag victory never tasted so sweet. From that moment on, Karen stayed away. Oh, she still glared from across the street. She still walked past my house muttering under her breath. But she never spoke to me again. And best of all, she stopped enforcing fake rules. The mailbox stayed. The gnome stayed. The neighborhood, once again, became a peaceful place. And every time I saw Karen outside, watching me with barely contained frustration, I knew that deep down, she knew she had lost. The block party had done more than just ruffle Karen's feathers. It had shifted the entire neighborhood dynamic. For the first time, people weren't just whispering about Karen's antics in hushed tones. They were openly mocking her. She had spent years cultivating an image of herself as the neighborhood watchdog, the self-appointed enforcer of community standards. But now, she was the neighborhood joke. And the best part, she knew it. Hashtag the gossip mill kicks into overdrive. The morning after the block party, I ran into Tom and his wife, Linda, while watering my non-HOA compliant lawn. Linda smirked. Karen's been pacing in her yard since sunrise. I grinned. You think she's plotting her revenge? Tom laughed. I give it a week before she tries something even dumber. And Tom was right, because Karen wasn't done, She might have lost the battle, but in her mind, she was still waging a war. So she did what Karen does best. She started spreading rumors. I started hearing them from different neighbors. Did you hear? He's lowering property values. Apparently, he's a troublemaker. I heard he threatened the HOA board. Each rumor was more ridiculous than the last. But what Karen didn't realize was that her credibility was already shot. No one was taking her seriously anymore. Hashtag Karen versus. The neighborhood **. Karen's spiral into chaos wasn't just about me anymore. She had started turning on everyone. One afternoon, I found Sarah, a neighbor from 2 streets over, ranting in the community Facebook group. Does anyone else get random violation notices from Karen? Because I just got one for my holiday wreath in September. Within minutes, the comment section exploded. Tom **, she tried to fine me for my cat trespassing. My cat is an indoor cat, **. Linda **, she left a handwritten note in my mailbox saying my porch furniture was inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. Steve, HOA board member for the last time. Karen is not in charge of violations. The entire thread turned into a roast session. People started sharing Karen horror stories, some dating back years. The time she threatened to call CPS on a family because their kids were too loud. The time she harassed a delivery driver for parking incorrectly. The time she measured a neighbor's Christmas decorations with a tape measure to prove they were too big. By the end of the day, Karen's self-appointed power had completely crumbled. The neighbors weren't afraid of her anymore. They were laughing at her. ####, the HOA finally has enough. Karen had always claimed to have the HOA's backing. But after years of complaints, the actual HOA board had officially run out of patience. At the next board meeting, Karen showed up with her usual binder of violations, ready to demand action against me and several others. What she didn't expect. The HOA president, James, was already waiting for her. "Karen," he said, rubbing his temples, "we need to talk." According to Tom, who attended for the drama, the entire room went silent as James laid into her. "You do not have authority to enforce anything. You are not on the HOA board. You are making a fool of yourself." Karen tried to protest, waving around her printed-out photos of supposed infractions. But James shut her down. "We have received over 30 complaints about you, Karen." And just like that, it was over. Karen's last shred of power was gone. The HOA formally banned her from submitting further complaints unless they were about actual violations, which meant she had no reason to bother me anymore. And the best part? The HOA sent out an official letter to the entire neighborhood, clarifying that Karen had no authority and that her complaints were to be ignored. #### Karen's bitter retreat. After that meeting, Karen went quiet. She stopped patrolling the streets. She stopped writing violation notices. She stopped harassing people. But she wasn't happy about it. Every time I saw her outside, she would glare daggers at me. One time, I caught her glaring at my mailbox like it had personally wronged her. Another time, I noticed her standing on the sidewalk, staring at my gnome army with pure hatred. And every time, I would simply smile and wave. Because Karen had lost. And everyone knew it. Karen might have been forced into silence, but she wasn't defeated. At least, not yet. Even after the HOA shut her down, she still had one last trick up her sleeve. And this time, she wasn't just after me. She was out for revenge against the entire neighborhood. ### Karen's last power move. The first sign that Karen was still scheming came in the form of anonymously mailed complaints. Neighbors started finding letters in their mailboxes. Letters that were typed up with the usual bolded, underlined Karen speak, but without a signature. "Your driveway has excessive cracks and needs immediate repair. Your holiday decorations are still up past the acceptable time frame. Your lawn chairs do not match the HOA color scheme." The problem? Everyone already knew her handwriting. And everyone knew she had been banned from making complaints. Tom was the first to call her out. He took a picture of the letter he received and posted it in the community Facebook group with the caption, "Nice try, Karen. Next time, at least change the font." The responses were brutal. Linda *, she's out here running a bootleg HOA from her living room. Steve *, I got the same letter. Who wants to place bets on how long before she gives up? Sarah *, she's like a villain in a movie that refuses to die. Karen never responded. But the letters stopped. For a few weeks, it seemed like she had finally accepted defeat. But then she snapped. ### Karen goes full psycho. One evening, around 10 p.m., I heard a strange noise outside. When I peeked out my window, I saw a dark figure standing near my mailbox. At first, I thought maybe it was a prankster, or worse, an actual criminal. But then the figure stepped into the glow of the streetlight. And I realized, it was Karen. ***. And she was holding a ruler. I watched in stunned disbelief as she bent down and started measuring the grass near my sidewalk. I had never seen anything so unhinged. Was she hoping to find a stray blade of grass that violated some imaginary rule? I pulled out my phone and started recording. And then, just for fun, I opened my front door. "Karen," I called out, struggling not to laugh. "Everything okay?" She jumped like she had just been caught committing a federal crime. Then, she bolted back toward her house. No explanation. No attempt to justify what she was doing. She just ran. The video? It went viral in the neighborhood chat. Tom, *, she's measuring grass in the dead of night. Someone do a welfare check. Sarah, *, at this point, it's not even HOA drama, it's a psychological case study. Linda, *, should we start a GoFundMe for therapy? After that, Karen's weird behavior escalated. She started walking past my house 5 times a day. She took photos of my yard from behind bushes. She left sticky notes on neighbors' cars with advice on how to park properly. She was desperately clinging to control. But her final mistake was the thing that got her kicked out of the HOA for good. ##### the final straw. Karen's illegal complaint. Despite the HOA's formal warning, Karen was still emailing them nonstop. Most of her complaints were ignored, but one email went too far. She claimed that one of our neighbors was running an illegal business out of their garage. The problem? That neighbor was James, the HOA president. James was furious. He called a surprise HOA meeting, and this time Karen wasn't just being scolded. She was on trial. Tom, ever the neighborhood historian, secretly recorded the whole thing. James stood at the front of the room, holding up Karen's email like a piece of evidence in a courtroom drama. "Karen," he began, his voice dangerously calm, "you have repeatedly submitted false complaints. You have harassed residents. You have refused to respect this community's boundaries." Karen crossed her arms. "I was just trying to uphold the standards." James cut her off. "You accused me of operating an illegal business." A murmur ran through the room. Karen froze. James narrowed his eyes. "Would you like to explain that?" Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Then, in the most glorious moment of the entire saga, James turned to the rest of the HOA board and said, "Effective immediately, Karen is banned from attending any future HOA meetings." Karen gasped. Someone in the back started clapping. James continued. "Furthermore, she is officially barred from submitting complaints against any homeowner." Karen stood up abruptly. "You can't do this to me." But James wasn't done. "Failure to comply," he added, "will result in legal action." Karen's face turned so red, I thought she might actually explode. Then, she stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door behind her. And just like that, ****, it was over. ****. #### the aftermath. Karen stayed inside for 3 days. No patrols. No fake notices. Just silence. Then, word spread that she was selling her house. She was leaving. At first, no one believed it. But then, the for sale sign went up. And the neighborhood erupted into celebration. Tom threw a Karen's Gone barbecue. Someone put balloons on the stop sign near her house. Linda made t-shirts that said "Free at last." And me? I just sat on my porch, sipping a beer, watching as Karen packed up her life and drove away. The last thing she ever did was glare at me from her car window. And I just waved. Because I had won. The moment Karen's car disappeared down the street, a collective sense of relief settled over the neighborhood. It was as if a dark cloud had finally lifted, leaving behind clear skies and a Karen-free existence. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could walk outside without being watched. No more fake violation notices, no more unsolicited lawn critiques, no more unwanted lectures on community standards. It was over. Or so I thought. A week after Karen's departure, I got a call from Tom. "Dude," he said, barely able to contain his laughter. "You're not going to believe this." Apparently, in her desperation to flee the neighborhood, Karen had sold her house way below market value. Not just a little below, ****, tens of thousands of dollars below, ****. For someone who had spent years obsessing over property values, it was the ultimate irony. She tanked her own resale price, Tom cackled, because she couldn't stand living here anymore. That little nugget of poetic justice was just the beginning. A few days later, the new homeowners moved in. A young couple with 2 dogs and a love for lawn ornaments. Within a week, they had tripled the number of gnomes in the front yard. An entire army of colorful, ridiculous garden gnomes. I nearly cried laughing. When I finally got around to introducing myself, the new neighbor, Mike, grinned and said, "Yeah, we heard about the HOA tyrant. Figured we'd dedicate the lawn to her memory." Karen would have hated it, and that made it even better. But karma wasn't done with her yet. A month later, Sarah found out where Karen had moved. "She's in a new HOA," she announced gleefully. And guess what? We all leaned in. "She's not on the board." Tom nearly spit out his drink. "She moved to another HOA," he gasped. "And she's just a regular resident?" Sarah nodded. "Not just that. She's already been reported." The news spread like wildfire. Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of community standards, was now on the receiving end of the very rules she once weaponized. It turned out her new neighborhood had actual HOA officers, ****, strict ones, ****. And Karen, she had already gotten multiple violations for things like leaving her trash cans out too long, using unapproved patio furniture, having plants that weren't neighborhood compliant. The hypocrisy was delicious. I pictured her opening those official HOA notices, the very thing she had once loved forcing onto others, and losing her mind. It was too perfect. Back in our now peaceful neighborhood, things only got better. Without Karen, people actually started enjoying their homes. Tom and Linda put up Halloween decorations in September, just because they could. Steve, the HOA board member Karen had tormented for years, approved a new, more relaxed set of HOA guidelines, ensuring no future Karen could rise to power. And me? I got to enjoy my home the way I always wanted. My mailbox stayed. The gnomes multiplied. And every once in a while, when I sat outside, I would raise my drink to where Karen's house once stood. Because in the end, justice had been served. With Karen gone, the neighborhood felt lighter, freer, like a collective weight had been lifted. People were outside more, chatting, decorating their homes however they pleased, and most importantly, living without fear of clipboard-wielding tyranny. The new neighbors, Mike and his wife, wasted no time making their mark. The gnome army in their front yard doubled, and Mike even installed a motion-activated one that danced and played music whenever someone walked by. Asterisk, asterisk, a tribute to the fallen dictator. Asterisk, asterisk, he joked when I complimented it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Karen had spent years policing this neighborhood, convinced she could control every inch of it. And now, the street had become a shrine to her worst nightmare. The best part? The HOA board, now free from Karen's harassment, was actually becoming helpful. They stopped nitpicking minor infractions, focused on real issues like fixing the community pool, and even started hosting events instead of enforcing pointless rules. The same HOA Karen had weaponized for years was now the exact opposite of what she had wanted. And as for her? Every now and then, someone would check in on the legend of Karen. According to Sarah's latest update, she was still struggling in her new HOA. The newest violation? Her mailbox wasn't HOA approved. Oh, the sweet, sweet irony. As for me, I finally had the peaceful home I had always wanted. No more threats, no more nonsense, just a house I could enjoy without some power-hungry neighbor breathing down my neck. One evening, as I sat on my porch, beer in hand, Tom walked over. "You ever think she'll come back?" he asked, smirking. I laughed. Not a chance. We clinked our bottles together, watching the motion-activated gnome army dance in the moonlight. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood was finally Karen-proof.